Hello and welcome to Spinder's Library.
I'm Claudia.
This
is Bill. And today we're discussing the question of whether we are living in a dystopia.
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for watching.
So why do you think we're living in a dystopia?
Well, first of all, let's set up what we've actually got as reference points at the moment. Bill's been reading George Orwell's 1984. I finished that last month.
Show off.
I've been reading A Clockwork Orange, so we're both reading some mid-century dystopia at the moment. And we've also been watching Years and Years, which is the BBC drama being broadcast at the moment, written by Russell T Davies.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had a lot of exposure to dystopian fiction, but the question is, are we living in a real-life dystopia?
Minerva's eating the flag.
Oh, she's eating democracy.
Minerva noms democracy.
In the British news the other day was a story about a hospital, NHS-funded hospital in County Durham that's been psychologically torturing adults with autism and learning disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty dystopian.
I thought that we're living in a dystopia because of rising populism.
Rising populism, yes.
I think.
It was kind of shocking. So we've just had the European Parliament elections. The results aren't out yet at time of recording, but the Brexit Party is expected to do incredibly well. The Brexit Party is a party that didn't exist a few weeks ago, that doesn't have a manifesto.
Hang on, are you subject to Ofcom broadcasting rules? Well, because if you were, you probably couldn't say that.
I don't think I'm being regulated by Ofcom.
Well, if you are, you're in trouble.
So the Brexit Party didn't exist a few weeks ago and doesn't have a manifesto and is basically just a single person.
That's the craziest bit.
That it's just a single person.
There's no manifesto.
No manifesto. Yeah. But I think it's the being represented by only one person, the kind of cult of personality that makes it populist, I think. So the populist movement, I mean, that's something we've seen across the world, really. This isn't something that's unique to the UK right now. So the European Parliament elections were yesterday at time of filming, and I had a bit of a struggle to actually get my vote in. And so did a lot of others, EU citizens living here. If you go on Twitter and you search the hashtag denied my vote, you'll find lots of stories of people who were turned away from the polling stations despite having sent in all of the forms on time. I had to send in a form, you didn't, which I knew about because we'd seen it online. But the government and the local councils made absolutely no effort to actually inform the European citizens that they had to send in this form. I think deliberate misinformation in order to exclude people from a democracy is another sign of a dystopia.
Yeah. The same thing happened, was mirrored with UK citizens living in the EU, where the government used a cheaper postal service than Royal Mail. So people, I think it was people in France were getting the forms via the Netherlands, and it just didn't show up in time to get it back in time. At what point do you think something stops being incompetence and starts being deliberate voter suppression?
I think there is something in between those two, which is something like deliberate negligence, where the government is putting their resources in a specific way, their limited resources, in a specific way to exclude foreigners or people who live abroad. But even the people who were informed, like myself, and who had sent in that special form, we had some issues actually casting our vote. I had to convince the clerks at the polling station to double check their lists until they found another list that had my name on it, because on the first list it said that I wasn't allowed to vote. All of this is an example of the government not running smoothly, and not running smoothly in a way that deliberately affects a certain subset of people in the country.
Limited to that, and you can time this video exactly now, is that we've just watched the Prime Minister resign. Or say when she's going to resign. That means that there's going to be a leadership election in the Conservative Party, and the leadership election in the Conservative Party is going to determine our new Prime Minister. So our new Prime Minister will be determined solely by Conservative MPs and then paid up members of the Conservative Party.
Yeah. So the way it works is Conservative MPs select 2 candidates out of the people who've put themselves forward, and then the Conservative membership is going to vote between those 2 candidates. So the general public doesn't get a say in who our new Prime Minister is until the new Prime Minister decides to hold a general election, which could be as late as when the 5 years are up. Right? There's no legal necessity for the new Prime Minister to run a general election.
Not at all. And in fact, with the Fixed Term Parliament Act, it might be tricky for them to run it. They can't. I don't think they can just call it. They need a majority in Parliament for it. Democracy in the UK is very bad anyway. We get one first past the post vote for your local MP, and everything else is figured out from that. Normally, you go into a general election, and most people, I think, don't know who their local MP is, and they'll vote for a party, and they'll vote for a party largely based on the leadership of the party.
Yes.
If you voted Conservative last time, you voted Conservative thinking Theresa May is going to be your leader, but now you don't get a say in it whatsoever. Moving away from Westminster for a bit, because you didn't intend this to be a political video, and I'm sure you'll cut out half of that. Let's talk about charity shops and pound shops.
Charity shops and pound shops. So the way charity shops work in this country is they get subsidised rents, don't they? They don't have to pay as much rent as a for-profit company to set up a shop on a high street. So what do charity shops have to do with a dystopia?
It's always said that charity shops and pound shops are signs of economic decline, that the local economy isn't doing particularly well when they start having lots more charity shops and pound shops. Now, our charity shops and pound shops are closing down because they can't afford to stay open. What does that mean?
So my theory about pound shops is the pound is declining, has been steadily declining since the Brexit referendum. So pound shops, which by definition have to sell things for £1, can't afford it because they can't raise their prices like every other shop can. So they're basically just selling their stuff for less and less money, but still paying the same amount in stock, because obviously they buy their stock from overseas in dollars.
Before the Brexit vote, this was $1.50. And last I checked, it is $1.30. $1.30, which is a substantial reduction in the amount I get paid every month, and a substantial reduction in the amount of money everybody has as well.
The first time I actually came to the UK on holiday, £1 was almost exactly €1.50.
I think certainly economic decline is one of the big catalysts that creates a dystopia. It's not necessarily a dystopia in and of itself, is it?
It's not a symptom, it's a cause.
Yeah. So that will cause our dystopia.
Yeah. In both of the dystopias that we've been reading, and a lot of the classic dystopian, if you think of 20th century dystopian fiction, the world is poor, but the governments of each of these worlds pretends that everything is fine.
A similarity as well that I've noticed, having not even got very far in this book, like you can see, like that's my bookmark. I'm like a third of the way in. The price of chocolate. The availability of chocolate, the ration of chocolate that you get. In 1 week, they did an announcement. The chocolate ration has been reduced to 20 grams, and then next week they did an announcement saying, just generally isn't our government doing amazingly well, and they say even our chocolate ration has been increased to 20 grams.
Yes.
May does this.
Yeah.
Like pretty much literally this. So Corbyn in Prime Minister's Questions will ask something like, per pupil funding in schools has gone down, and he knows this, and in real terms this is actually true, that per pupil funding has fallen since 2010. And May's response is basically, this government is putting more into schools per pupil than any other government ever has. Watch any PMQs, except possibly the next one. But go back and watch any previous PMQs and you will find Newspeak. Lots of it.
Another similarity to 1984, it's kind of scary how a book from almost 70 years ago basically says a lot about our society. Another similarity is obviously the rewriting of history is a really big topic in 1984, but more specifically, blaming today's problems on yesterday's leaders is something that Theresa May loves to do.
The previous Labour
government, yes. And obviously ignoring the fact that the previous Labour government, who weren't perfect, of course they weren't, but they had to deal with a financial crisis that they didn't cause.
No. That's the other thing, like the way that you apportion blame in a way that's incredibly convenient for you. Gordon Brown has been blamed a lot for the global financial crisis.
I think the global financial crisis is possibly the biggest contributing factor to the way things are moving now. I think everything that we are noticing now in world politics, in the world economy, is an after effect of the financial crisis.
I think that is correct to say that the global financial crash was the catalyst for all of this.
Catalyst, you little catalyst.
Yeah. Populism doesn't work when people are happy.
That's true.
That's why the financial crash, that's the link between the global financial crash and now.
One of the links. Yeah. But yeah, economic decline produces extreme politics, I suppose.
It produces extreme politics because it produces extreme disenfranchisement with the current political system. So a lot of people are saying that the Brexit vote wasn't just to leave the EU. Polls will back this up. If you look at polls for how people felt about the EU specifically before the referendum, I think only 20% of people or something cared one way or another. The Brexit vote, therefore, a lot of it was just, I don't like politics where it is.
Economic decline has produced many revolutions in the world that have led to better governments as well. So it's not like the idea of people getting interested in politics is necessarily a bad thing. Of course it's not. But unfortunately, this time round, I feel like it's going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Well, that's cheerful. Do we have any non-political examples of living in a dystopia? Well, no, because a dystopia is a political concept, yes.
Unless it's a natural disaster.
Well, that's the thing. A lot of dystopian fiction is set in a future after some sort of disaster, whether that's a war or a natural disaster. So we haven't spoken about climate change. Because climate change might just provide the next catalyst for a dystopia to happen.
I'm going to insist now that we use the Guardian's updated editorial guidelines. The Guardian has recently updated its editorial guidelines so they can no longer say climate change. They have to say climate crisis.
Climate crisis. Okay, I'm up for that. Because I'm not a scientist, but I believe the scientists who say that we are accelerating towards the point of no return, which is when we can't fix it anymore, when we can only do very basic amounts of damage limitation. I thought when we saw the Extinction Rebellion protests over the past few months, the images I was seeing on TV, they could have been out of a dystopian novel. People just desperate to get attention to this inevitable change in how we live our lives. The people who benefit most from exploiting the climate, from exploiting, our natural surroundings, just kind of ignoring it because they don't want to harm their profits. I have an example. I can't talk about where I work because I've signed a very lengthy social media contract thingy. But where I work has recently changed the packaging for their products. It's a retail shop. They've recently changed the packaging for their products to use more recyclable materials. So they use less ink, they use less plastic on their packaging. However, we still don't recycle our waste in the shop that I work at. It all gets thrown in the same bin as the plastic packaging. So this is, I think, an example of what's called greenwashing.
Using recyclable materials means nothing if you don't recycle them.
Quite.
It's hilarious.
Yes.
And horrible. We do have an incoming climate crisis, and that's also part of the story in Years and Years, where there is an environmentalist campaigner. Yeah. The environmentalist person basically comes to the conclusion that it's too late. We could have done something 5 years ago, 10 years ago, basically where we are now.
Yeah.
But it's too late. The world's burning. That's it. Just enjoy the rest of your life, is what she says.
There's a scene where she's being interviewed on TV, and the interviewer says, "Why did no one tell us?" And she's like, "Oh, listen, we did, but no one was listening."
Yeah.
Well, I like to think that if there is an actual emergency and any kind of situation that requires survival, I want to be the first to go. I don't want to be living in the tents and in the caves and eating canned food from decades ago.
Yeah, fair. Years and Years also has the trade war between the US and China escalating. We haven't even talked about the US at all.
Oh, no, we have not talked about the US. Well, everything that we said about the UK also applies to the US.
Okay, everything that we've said about...
Reproductive rights, Bill, we have to talk about reproductive rights.
We do have to talk about reproductive rights. Okay, but let's do water first.
Okay, let's do water first.
In Flint, Michigan, they still don't have clean water, is that right?
Yeah, they're still living on bottled water, I think. And that's one of those very basic things.
Yeah, that's one of those very basic things that Trump just hasn't provided for them. They just haven't fixed it.
No.
What we think of as basic human necessities are in decline in some places, including reproductive rights.
Including reproductive rights. And this is a thing that's been in the news lately because of certain US states moving to block abortion rights in like I said, in specific states, but also trying to make it federal. However, right here, right across the sea in Northern Ireland, we still don't have the right to abortion in any case. I mean, there's the caveat that if the mother's life is in danger, which still didn't prevent that woman in the Republic of Ireland from dying a few years ago.
It's insane to think that the Republic of Ireland...
The Republic of Ireland.
It's incredibly Catholic Republic of Ireland has decent abortion law.
And equal marriage, where Northern Ireland doesn't.
And the UK does not. Part of the United Kingdom does not.
And the UK, at least kind of, if you look back in like NHS history, the UK has always prided itself on being one of the front runners in terms of abortion rights, one of the leaders, they introduced it back, I think, in the 60s, I want to say. And actually, it's not true, because one of the 4 nations in the UK does not have legalised abortions. And that's something that we should be a lot more in arms up about.
As an aside, this is why you can never take the DUP seriously when they talk about the importance of the Union and keeping the laws the same between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK.
Yes.
The way that we watched some of the interviews and stuff, didn't we? The way the politicians and people are talking about regressive abortion law in Alabama is frightening.
It's frightening because it's so uninformed. The picture's been making the rounds of the dozens of white old men who will never get pregnant, making decisions about people who do in fact get pregnant.
Yep.
But they are so uninformed about how any of this works medically. Now, you have not read The Handmaid's Tale, speaking of another 20th century dystopian classic, but you have seen the first series of the TV show, which was pretty close to the book. And it's not a coincidence that women protesting these restrictive abortion laws are dressing up like the handmaidens in The Handmaid's Tale.
They are saying outright, this is dystopian.
Yeah.
What you're doing is dystopian.
Yeah, we're moving towards the Republic of Gilead.
The subjugation of women is, I think, probably it's a normal thing that you see in dystopia, isn't it?
The Handmaid's Tale is one of the few classic ones that actually has this as a topic. After The Handmaid's Tale, there were loads and loads and loads of dystopian novels published that focused on the oppression of women. Now, the point I should make is the reason why the oppression of women hasn't been a topic in classic dystopia is because most of these books that we're talking about were written by men. So this just wasn't something they were worried about.
But there's certainly, even in these, there's controlling people's sexual behaviour is a big part of dystopia, and it's a big part of 1984 as well, even the third of it that I've read, where sex is purely for reproduction and you're basically not allowed to have it otherwise. So the Christian right in America and the abortion laws in Alabama, the intention is to stop people having sex. If they were concerned about abortions, they would be giving you free contraception.
Oh yeah, and they'd also regulate IVF and things like that, which they don't.
There is another interpretation, which is also pretty evil and dystopian, is that they are wanting the birth rate to increase, which is what happens when you make abortion illegal, when you don't give out contraceptives advice, when you don't give out proper sex education. The birth rate increases in that area, which is white. That one of the drivers for at least some of the lawmakers in Alabama is going to be straight up racism. They want more white people. They want white people to reproduce and make more little white people.
Yeah, I don't think that's too far-fetched.
Do you think that religious fanaticism, whether it's actual religion or for something else, is also a common element of dystopia?
I think so too, because faith is the belief in something controlling your life other than yourself and the people around you.
So you have to have absolute faith in 1984 in Big Brother.
Yes. Yeah, Big Brother is a religious figure. In The Handmaid's Tale, just the Christian religion is the driving force behind government.
Yeah.
I don't think the UK is going to become more religious, but I think faith in populist leaders is going to increase. And I think Jeremy Corbyn is another symptom of that. Oh,
Certainly. He's been lifted up by many people as being this absolute perfect leader who can do no wrong.
Like a rock star.
Yeah, and it's not right. I fell for it a little bit in the past as well, and it's not right. The religious fervour over Brexit could also be an example of this.
You fall on one side or the other. It's the same in America. It's impossible to have a nuanced debate about this. Mm-hmm. And people don't believe experts. Oh, vaccinations. That's another example.
Vaccinations, yeah. Well, the science is clear, but I've got faith.
Okay, let's finish the video off with some dystopian recommendations. We've already mentioned Years and Years. Watch it if you can. If you're not in the UK, try and get hold of it somehow. You need to read 1984 if you haven't read it yet. I wouldn't recommend A Clockwork Orange at the moment. I'm not very far in, but it's a bitch to read. What can you recommend in terms of dystopian? I mean, you can recommend your video games.
Have I said Papers, Please?
Don't know. You said it now.
Right. Papers, Please is very good. There is also... Obviously, the Fallout series is a good kind of dystopia.
In terms of books, there will be a video in the coming months about 20th century dystopian fiction, in which I'll discuss a lot of titles, some well-known ones and some not so well-known ones. So if you're enjoying your dystopian fiction, or as we can call it now, your realist fiction, then hold out until I've read more books and can do that video.
And obviously do watch The Handmaid's Tale as well, season 1, if you haven't already.
Watch it if you can stomach it. I found it very difficult to watch. And topics that I find easier to read. No, actually, it's all about physical violence. I can't watch gore, but I can read about it. But consume The Handmaid's Tale in some form or another. Right, we'll leave it there. Oh, I don't even want to ask a question in the comments. People are gonna.
There's lots of stuff you can pick on.
There's lots of stuff you can pick on.
Let's have your Brexiters. Let's have your Farage enthusiasts. Let's have your Corbynites defending Corbyn. We'll have some of those. Got any anti-vaxxers out there? If you want to tell us that we're ignorant as well. Go ahead.
So any pro-life people, put your comments in a polite and respectful way. As much as I enjoy the trolls, and honestly guys, I love you because you're just so hilariously entertaining, but anything that's really blatantly offensive I will just remove. And thank you for watching.
It's going to be a hell of a video for you to cut.
Oh yeah. Bye!
Bye!